and we're going to talk about Sadia Khan, and we're going to talk about Sadhguru. We're going to talk about, how these two different type of people and coaches, kind of like how they, and spiritual teachers, mystics, and yogis and masters in spirituality, even me as a tantra master for women, how we see relationships, how let's say regular coaches talk about relationships and the modern problems with finding a partner, staying with the partner, having a positive relationship. And the interesting thing is that it's so complex because people are so different and they have their own like karmic problems. They have their own, unresolved issues and things they need to work through. And it's interesting to look at it from these different perspectives and understand that there are layers to it, that you can like see it from a very simple mindset where you're like, how can I attract someone superficially, which is more like the Sadia Khan kind of thing, to have a very profound understanding of what relationships even are. Because if you look at it very deeply, it's basically two souls coming together to grow, or to look at each other, to reflect each other. So you can see it from all these different perspectives, and we're gonna try to look at that and do that very calmly and understand it from perspectives that might be completely new to you. So one of the things that you definitely want to understand are chakras, the 7 main chakras. Maybe you've heard of chakras, maybe you haven't, but you have basically the 7 main chakras are the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, the heart chakra, the throat chakra, the third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. Those are the 7 main ones. And they have certain emotional frequencies to it. And depending how the energy moves through the body, it basically defines the relationship that you have. I'll give you one example. I mean, this topic goes super, super deep. So if you're ready to learn, you will learn a lot of stuff, a lot of very interesting stuff. And one of the things is that the ideal relationship, the ideal partner, you have a chakra connection to. So, for example, your heart chakra opens up, their heart chakra opens up. That's the ideal symmetric chakra relationship. When I see you, my heart chakra opens up. When I think about you, my heart chakra opens up. And the other person, when I feel you, when I see you, my heart chakra opens up. That is kind of like the ideal relationship. When I see you, my third eye chakra opens up. When I see you, my third eye chakra opens up. When I'm near you, my sacral chakra opens up. When I'm near you, my sacral chakra opens up. Those are the kind of ideal symmetric chakra relationships. And what's interesting, an interesting thing is, and very few people talk about this, is that it's actually astrologically determined how strong those chakra attractions are. So, and this makes it a very mystic kind of also experience to find someone that you truly have this kind of relationship with on this Kundalini chakra level. Is a mystic relationship. It's basically is two people with a certain astrological alignment coming together, maybe through synchronicity, and really coming together on a conscious level into a conscious relationship. Now, here comes the thing that you can work on yourself superficially. You can work on yourself superficially and be like, I'll try to be a higher value man, okay? But what you actually have to do is you need to look at your chakras, because from your chakras, from all this energy, your outside is determined. Not only how you perceive the outside, but also how you react and move within that which is apparently outside. Okay? So the yogis basically say, and Sadhguru says basically, all of your experience, all experience that you have is the experience that you actually have in your spine. So your spine with your chakras, your electrical system, you could say, or your energetic system, determines how you perceive the world. So you're actually perceiving the partner not on the outside, you're actually perceiving him or her on the inside. It's actually the electrical signals, your energetic system, as it moves those waves it perceives from the other person, those energies that it receives from the other person, how it's perceived within you. So when you're changing yourself, or you're clearing yourself, or you're cleaning yourself from the inside, you start to perceive the outside different. And of course, then you have the quantum mechanic kind of thing where the moment you change as an observer, you change the observed experiment. So basically, what it means is that as you change yourself, you start to change to how you see the relationship and everything around it, and therefore also all people that you come in contact with. So to give you a very simple example, if my heart chakra is completely open, like completely soft and open, then naturally I see the whole world as loving, and I see on that frequency. And I have a great analogy for this. You can only see on which frequency you transmit. Think of like bats or dolphins, right? When they send sonar or any kind of waves, and then those waves reflect, and that's how they perceive the 3D world, right? But if they didn't send this wave, then they cannot perceive on this wave. So basically, if you don't send anything on your heart chakra, you cannot see on the frequency of the heart chakra. So for example, let's just say there is a man or woman only on the sexual drive, only sexually seeing everything sexually, right? So they're on the sacral chakra, which is fine if you're there. But if they're not open on their heart chakra at all, they are gonna miss all of the people that would be compatible for them on the heart chakra, that are moving by them let's say in a crowd of people, because they're transmitting only on the low frequency. They're only seeing within their own energy system. They're only seeing the sacral chakra. So that explains to you how you perceive the world depending on what frequency you're on. So, and the moment you change the frequency you're on, the moment you change what you perceive. And as you perceive differently, you can choose differently. So if, say, for example, you're only on the loving frequency, like, for example, Amma is this guru from India, then you see the whole world as loving. And then you're, of course, going to act different towards everyone else. And here comes the thing is, Sadia Khan is not on her heart chakra. She's on her trauma response. And the audio that was leaked for Sadia Khan, the audio that was leaked by Sadia Khan, or with Sadia Khan, shows that she was only on the sacral chakra, the sexual power kind of chakra. And this is interesting, like when you understand chakras and their corresponding emotions, and you understand that there's blockages within those chakras for a lot of people, and you look at how they live and what they say, then you understand, this is so interesting, then you understand exactly what's going on in their body. So when Sadia attacks people that are calling her out, then you know, then you definitely know how her chakra system works. So basically, on one hand, she says, I can give him blowjob anytime. The day you marry him, or the day you're not in the house, I can come over and fuck him anytime. Blah blah blah. That's what she said in the leaked audio. Okay. And the second thing is in the comments. When somebody calls her out, she attacks the people. So you have two things. One of the things is, I have sexual power. I have more sexual power than any other woman. So she wants to have more sexual power than any other woman. Okay, over guys. So because that seems to be for her the idea of self-worth. Okay, so how much sexual worth she has for guys. So that's in contact with her self-worth. So self-worth, by the way, is solar plexus, is identity. And the second thing is that if she gets called out and she is not accepted fully, then she lashes out and attacks people. So that's also solar plexus. It's basically the need for acceptance, because solar plexus, the emotions and the frequency of solar plexus are ego, identity, acceptance, being accepted, not accepted, willpower, ability to manifest in the 3D world. Those are the aspects of the solar plexus. Solar plexus is right basically where your stomach is. And those frequencies then determine how she sees the world and how she moves through the world. And if there's a blockage, she will basically live out any experience through these blockages. And as long as she has these strong blockages, she can never be truly happy. Because whatever experience that she has will be filtered by the blockage that she has. So she will never truly feel free until she releases that blockage. So, and it's very common, this thing in the Muslim world, for women to have this problem in the solar plexus, to not feel accepted, because the whole society is built on that, and for women to not be accepted fully within the society, you're less than, basically. So it's a very hard problem to solve. And so that's why people like Sadhguru, why they recommend basically to work on yourself, to go, for example, through Isha Foundation, to do a lot of yoga work and so forth, in order to work through basically these blockages that you have, because then you come truly into kind of like an energetic happiness, you could say. Okay, an energetic happiness, and that makes a huge difference. So if you face anything in life, the ideal process to go through is to look at your chakras first. Okay, how's my root chakra? How's my sacral chakra? How's my solar plexus? How's my heart chakra? And sometimes it can be very difficult if you don't know how it would be if it were to totally open. How would it be if my throat chakra is totally open? And I have to explain something. This whole system, this whole energy system, is a very powerful system. You've maybe heard of Kundalini awakenings before, and they can be, for some people, they can be super, super, super powerful. And because the whole energy system is a very, very, very powerful system. And once this Kundalini starts to rise and starts to clear your chakras and all this stuff, it can throw you out of your normal life completely, and it can create also symptoms that you've never had before and so forth. And I remember I do spiritual sessions in larger group sessions, and I did, for example, with 20 or 30 people, I did like bija mantra sessions where 1 hour, 2 hours we do just bija mantras. And it's always interesting because the bija mantras help you open up the chakras. So you have the lam, vam, ram, yam, ham, om, mang, and then you have various sub mantras. But Those are the primary like bija mantras, and they open up your chakras. And it's interesting when somebody's new to it and some of their, chakras are closed, for example, throat chakra or something like that. It's very interesting what happens once they start to regularly start to do bija mantras. For example, I had this group of, let's say, 20 people, and there was this one woman. We did all the chakras, and when we came to the throat chakra, she completely flipped out. She jumped up and started running around. And like, ground yourself, barefoot on the grass, feel that energy, ground yourself. And she was running around like crazy. And then a week later, she called me up and she was like, man, I was able to tell my mother everything that I've never told her before. And she was maybe like 26, 27 years old. So in that moment, her throat chakra opened up so much. There was so much suppressed energy that suddenly she was able to communicate completely to basically to her mother about all the things that she never talked about before. So it's very interesting how energetic changes immediately force outer changes. And this is actually what yogis and Sadhguru, what he talks about. And these kind of energetic changes are much more profound and much more substantial to life changes than any kind of superficial advice you might give. So if you're like, think about it, like, you can be a high status value man, or you can be a man, and or there's not mutually exclusive. You can be a man with a completely clear chakra system. Okay, you can be successful at the same time. It's not like you can have the other, but it's and the interesting thing is, like, a lot of people try to, because they don't know better, they just try to change their outside, right? Their social status, for example, without actually changing their energetic state. And it does work to some extent, but you always, like I said, you always gonna hit the same problems. So you might have suddenly more social status, but the relationship problems will stay the same because your energetic system stayed the same. You might attract maybe a little bit different person, but that person might be even worse because they're only interested, in the fact that you have a higher status. So those things are super interesting. You say just need Jesus. Now I'm spiritually awakened through Mooji, and Mooji is a spiritual teacher who comes from the line of Papaji and Ramana Maharshi, and there it's about non-duality, Advaita Vedanta. That means true spiritual awakening. And when you truly spiritually awaken, you realize that either Jesus didn't even exist, or second, that he was just a yogi. Well, just a yogi. Maybe he was a good yogi. But the idea of the Christian Jesus as understood by neo-Christians is complete bullshit. It's absolute complete bullshit. There is no Jesus in the way you think there is. And I think it's very hard for people to swallow that pill because they've been brainwashed for so long. And that's, I think, also the reason why people like Sadhguru and other spiritual, masters, why they will become more and more prominent, because the people who follow, let's say, Jesus or an idea of Jesus, they don't have the profound wisdom and the profound backing of truly transforming someone's life. So it has more to do, I think, with the idea of ascetic. I think it's called, what is it called? I'm looking for the English word. Being ascetic? I think it's ascetic or something like that, where you renounce yourself. So I think that when people renounce themselves, in terms of their ego, in terms of their personality, and they're like, I'm giving myself to something so-called Jesus or Christianity, then they're giving up part of themselves. And this is actually a spiritual process. And so what you're not really believing in is in Jesus. What you're believing in is, that's just a false idea of something in your head. But what you're actually doing on a spiritual level is that you're giving part of yourself up for the possible benefit of, being led by something higher than yourself, other than your selfish ego. So it's what you're saying actually. So when people say is you need Jesus in your life, it actually means, what they're saying is basically you need to give up parts of yourself in order to have some kind of sense of, you could call it, say, purpose or something like that. But if you have a very clear soul plan and you understand your soul plan and you have a very clear purpose, then you don't need this process. But what you can do is have a spiritual awakening. And spiritual awakening is basically all in itself is a loss of personality and ego self. It's not fake and it's not ego. Well, Jesus is fake in that sense. What is not fake is the letting go of an idea of some higher self. It's called faith and commit. No, he's not. He is. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing in contemporary culture. There's absolutely nothing in contemporary culture that would give you any kind of clue that Jesus exists. There's absolutely nothing. And having faith in a higher power, let's just call it higher power, is natural, but calling it Jesus is not. There's nothing that has been ever proven. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you can talk as much as you want, but there's absolutely no proof. Absolutely no proof whatsoever. And I think maybe it's also time that people start to call, a lot of spiritual leaders, they try to avoid the spiritual question because they don't want to offend people. So it's like Sadhguru or somebody like Mooji says, well, spiritual awakening is open to everyone, which it is, factually. It is open to everyone. But they try to avoid to say, okay, Jesus doesn't exist, or prophet so-and-so doesn't exist. They try to avoid it because they don't want to upset people. And I think maybe it's time to call people out for the bullshit that it is. And what happens is a lot of people that are religious because they don't have a strong sense of self. So they need something from the outside to build their sense of self. Whereas the spiritually awakened person understands that there is actually no self, so they don't need anything outside of themselves. And like they say, I'm gonna die on this hill. When Anglo-Saxons say, I'm gonna die on this hill, I will definitely die on this hill, defending that there is nothing like Jesus and nothing like a prophet so and so. And you know how it's easy to understand this? Think about all the ancient cultures and other cultures that had various gods. Think about the Egyptians that had all these gods, the South American that had all these gods, the Hinduism that have all these gods. And the interesting thing is, if one of them would have to be right, so the likelihood that all of them are false is very high, extremely high. And stupid people love to believe any kind of bullshit. That's also why they believe everything that Sadia Khan says. And this is why also people rise to fame that are actually pretty stupid and saying pretty stupid things, because there are stupid people out there who eat it. I mean, think about McDonald's. Like, who the fuck goes to McDonald's? Like, you would have to be super stupid if you're a little bit informed. If you're a little bit informed about food, why the fuck would you go to McDonald's? It makes like literally 0 sense. But there's so many stupid people. That's why they go to McDonald's. That's why they listen to Sadia Khan. Because of the mass of stupid people that are out there. And I would say the absolute majority of society is stupid. Because if they weren't, the jab would have been taken maybe like by 10% of people. But I think the worldwide vaccination rate for the jab was like 70%. So the way over the majority are stupid people. People don't like a know-it-all. That's called ego. Well, actually, the person who doesn't like a know-it-all is also ego. The thing is, if you want to fight about these things, if you want to argue about these things, if you want to discuss about these things, and you have a false truth, I'm going to call you out for it, and you have literally 0 chance of winning against me. 0 chance. You would have to use absolute spiritual truth, then you would have a chance of winning against me in an argument, discussion, or whatever. But you have 0 chance if you use false truth. You might have a chance if you to speak to any XYZ random person, but not with me. No, I'm willing to learn. I don't think you're willing to learn. I would bet that you're not as willing to learn as you say you are. So, let's talk about ego, because you've used ego a couple of times here. You have ego, you have no ego, you have ego, you have no ego, this is ego, this is not ego. Let's understand ego first, because it's very easy to throw around the word ego. A lot of people don't understand what ego is. I'll tell you exactly what ego is. And even spiritual teachers get this wrong. So, imagine you're living in Russia. And there's a long period of ice and winter and snow where it's very hard to survive. Okay? But you have a period of harvest. Hi, Tita's home. I remember you. So, forget about all official definitions of the ego. Forget about ego. Listen to me as if you heard a new definition about ego to understand ego. Okay? Because most people don't understand it. So you're living in this Russia, right? And you're preparing yourself for winter. You have a harvest. And because you know in which cycles of weather you live, you understand that you need to prepare yourself for the future in order to survive the winter. And that's specific to people who know there's a harsh winter in which they otherwise could not survive. Okay, so you're preparing your harvest to survive for the winter. So you're thinking about the future. You have to think about the future. If you don't, in this kind of like level of the world, in this area of the world, if you don't think about the future, you will die. So you have a conditioned mind that says, I need to do this for the future in order to survive. Everyone else who hasn't done it dies. Okay? Everyone else who doesn't do it dies. It's a guarantee. Because you cannot survive if you're not prepared for the harsh winter. Okay? That's a guarantee. You're not going to survive in minus 40 degrees if you don't prepare. Okay? That's a harsh truth. Okay? There's no doubt about this. Okay? So there's an example of where you're conditioned by conditioning, forced to think about the future. So in your mind, you are prepared for the winter, okay? And you're doing everything you can so your family survives, you survive in minus 40 degrees. So now think about another example. Okay, so your mind is conditioned for future survival. You're not thinking about the current, what's happening today, you're thinking about the future, and we need to prepare. Everybody else will die in that winter. So now think about a second situation where you're not preparing for winter, but you're preparing for procreation. And you have two biological energies. One is survival, and the other is procreation. That is set in your energetic field. Survival and procreation. Those are set in your energy field. You cannot remove those energies unless you enlighten and leave your body. But as long as you're incarnated and experiencing this body, you're in survival and procreation. Okay? So we gave one example of a conditioned mind for survival. Now I'm going to give you a second one for procreation. Maybe you're not that good looking and you have trouble finding a wife, okay? So you try to become successful. If you're African and you live in some traditional tribe, you want to have 20 cows. If you are in a modern world, you might want to have, a Ferrari, okay, or a huge villa. Okay, so you have a Ferrari, okay? And you notice that your probability of procreation increased tremendously by having more wealth as a guy. Let's imagine, okay? In some areas, it will work better, in others not, but generally it works. So you have a very nice car, very nice house, very nice dress, and women are noticing you and you have a higher chance. Basically, every third woman wants to go out with you, although you're not that good looking. So now you improved your chances of procreation. Now a guy comes with spray paint and sprays on your Ferrari, sprays you dickhead with yellow, okay, on a red Ferrari. Now your perceived value for women dropped tremendously. They don't want to be seen in a car like that, okay? So what happens is that you become upset. And you're like, who the fuck? Who put this on my car? Like, leave my car alone. And then the extrapolation of that is if somebody leans onto your car because you're fearful that it gets scratched or something, you get like, who are you thinking you can lean onto my car? This is my car. I paid for it. This is what people call ego. So what ego actually is, now hold on to your horses. Ego is actually an overclocked survival and procreation mechanism, nothing else. So what people think is ego as, oh, this is so bad, is actually nothing else than overclocked procreation and survival mechanism. Everybody has it. There's no way to get rid of it. Ego cannot get away from it only if you leave the body. So this whole idea of what is ego and not ego and you should get rid of your ego is complete bullshit. This whole spiritual idea is, oh, your ego is so strong you need to get rid of it, is actually bullshit. Because in reality, ego assures your survival and procreation. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. So on a social level, it might not be calibrated, and you might be like, it's not so comfortable being with that person, but it works for them. It's a survival strategy. It's a procreation and survival strategy. So ego is nothing else than an overclocked survival and procreation strategy. It can go into like almost like clinical mental illness in a way, where you're like, you're coming into my space or something. I don't know, whatever. Like it can be very like, where you're like, whoa, what's going on with that guy? But and that's just uncalibrated, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a huge problem, or that that someone needs to get rid of their ego. There is something interesting about it, though, is that the universe has the tendency to remove people that are in their strong ego, because those are the people who have the tendency to be unbalanced in their energy system. So, for example, if you are very fearful of not procreating, you will probably be too much in your Pingala energy, in this masculine energy, and you will be constantly doing and forcing things forward without being in your balanced center. And that the universe doesn't like. The universe will push you into an accident, into a disease or something. You eat too much, you rest too little, you stress too much, all these kind of things. But it's not inherently a bad thing to be in your ego. It's just, it's in that moment, it's just unbalanced. Okay? So if you come to me and start to argument with ego, you first have to understand ego. And it's interesting because nobody talks about it, because nobody understands it. So I'm laying out the foundation of truly what ego is. And you cannot truly get rid of identification. You cannot get rid of identification. It doesn't work. What you can is maybe at some point, have, by the grace of something, grace of the universe, grace of God, it doesn't matter, you can have a full enlightenment. But that would make you leave the body. Do not 1 second think that Mooji doesn't have an ego or something like that, where he is like, oh, I want to fuck this chick, you know? He definitely has that energy. So you don't romanticize these things. Just look at it very clearly. There are millions of people who either through therapy or meditation practices are attempting to reduce the energy of the ego with a certain amount of success. You don't have to suffer a strong ego. That's correct. But it only makes sense when you suffer the ego. When you don't suffer the ego, it doesn't matter. You see, if you're spiritually awakened, you recognize that there's an ego and there's nothing you need to do about it. It just exists. Fine. Don't worry about it. The problem becomes for the seeker who thinks they need to do something about it, they need to worry about it, because then becomes a fight. Then it becomes how can I get rid of something that actually doesn't want to get rid of itself? It's like saying, I want to get rid of the body, but the body wants to stay and survive. It just doesn't make any sense. The ego is an important mechanism. It was made so that the mind learns to act free and separate from the idea of the higher power, so we can make mistakes and learn. Well, if you go super spiritual, then you have to ask yourself, of course, what is the purpose of incarnation? What is the purpose of the soul? What is, if there's such a thing as a soul? Why are we here? Why are we conscious and all of this stuff? And then you can start to find patterns in life. And one of these patterns could be is that everything that happens is actually a message of love in order to recognize yourself. So even the things that you interpret as negative or positive is a message to recognize yourself. But these things, because our minds are very limited in the spectrum and frequency of what we can observe, then everything that you filter through the mind in order to explain the situation that you're in is most likely false. So again, we have the tendency to romanticize things. And I want to give an example of how we romanticize life. And when we have to be aware of these filters to understand that these filters are not true. The filters are true, but it hides the reality of things. For example, if I say the dog is so cute, the cat is so cute, is the cat cute when it eats a mouse and the mouse screams? Is the dog cute when it attacks a bunny? No, it's only cute when it does something for you that you find as cute. Okay? So it's not always cute. And we have these filters on all the time because we don't want to see reality. And you could go even harsher. Would people be good looking if you remove their skin? Let's say all of society runs around without a skin. Would they be good looking? No. Okay, not with that filter that we have currently. So what I'm saying is that everything that we observe, we put through a filter. And you notice this in spiritual moments, in spiritual experiences, where the filter is removed. It could be psychedelics, or sometimes it's just like in eye-gazing experiments. When certain moments arise, you start to see reality more for what it is, because your filter is dropping. And I'm telling you that we constantly have this filter running. We constantly have the romanticizing filter running. Because otherwise we would have a hard time accepting life the way it is. So, and spirituality, especially neo-spirituality, has a lot to do with romanticizing the spiritual process and romanticizing the actual reason why we are on this earth and all of these things. And this is a huge problem for people in order to recognize truth. Because if in your mind you filter everything through that romanticizing filter, then you have no way to see the truth. So it's better to assume that you don't know the truth at all than to assume that you know the truth, because the likelihood of you perceiving everything 100% through that filter is very high. The problem is that ego has gone more array than it was designed to. The ego is a prism that takes the light and break it down into separate colors. The light is the pure energy. I wouldn't call it ego. I would call it experience of life itself. You see, you could argument that the most pure way to filter life is through the heart chakra alone. Okay, it's kind of like the area where the prism is, where the light shines through, kind of the most, you could say, through the heart chakra. And you could say that the idea is that as you let go of the so-called ego, that you might see everything more through the heart chakra, but that is not necessarily true. It just means that you tone down a certain area of your life, but it doesn't mean that you tone up, that you bring up another area of life, say the heart chakra. So I would say that the best spiritual experience is to let go of everything. I'm not just talking about ego or personality, or go into the state of zero effort. I call it the state of zero effort, and look what remains. And that then becomes the highest truth that you have access to. All other truths you probably don't have access to. And so I'm. This is also why you recognize, if you watch my videos or whatever, when I very rarely talk about ego, because ego is not a problem. Ego is only a problem when you try to expand the balloon so much that it's about to explode. But as long as it helps with survival and procreation, it is part of the genetic, energetic process of survival in the 3D world. You also don't say to a lion, like fighting with another lion for his territory. You know, lions have like hundreds of kilometers of territory, and when a lion wins basically a territory, he gets to fuck all the females in that territory, in his harem. And you also so don't say to a lion like it's your ego that is fighting for the territory. So you shouldn't do that with humans either. It's just a natural evolution of survival and procreation. So if you're in other words, if you're trying to spiritually progress, forget worrying about ego at all. Drop the whole idea of strong or weak ego. It's just, the thing is, we're sexual hierarchical beings. And just like, any other kind of animal. And that's why we don't like egos in others. We like our own ego, but we don't like the ego in others. And my ego is special because I have a spiritual ego, but your ego is shit because it's connected to the Ferrari. That's not how it works. That's just the super ego judging other egos. It's just accept that egos exist, that they're actually pretty good for survival and procreation, and that Leonardo DiCaprio is fucking like young girls while you are fucking an old woman and don't like her even that much. This is just reality. Forget about the whole ego thing. It's been so overused in the spiritual circles, this whole ego idea, because people don't understand what it is. It's so easy to say, oh, your ego is so strong because it's so easy to sexually hierarchical play with others. Actually, it's a toxic metaframe to talk bad about other people's egos. Like, your ego is so strong. It's actually a toxic metaframe. And I have separate videos for explaining toxic metaframes. It's actually, if you want to say it very simply, it's a sexual hierarchical play to toxic metaframe. So if you take away these things like ego, okay, let's not worry about ego. Then it's like, what is truly spiritual? Because the spiritual seeker, if you tell them, okay, your ego is so strong, you have to get rid of it, that makes it such an obvious thing to work on. Then it makes it so simple. It's like, here you have a book about ego, work on that. It's like, okay, thank you. So I have 10 years to work on that. So if you take that away and say, okay, the ego you cannot do anything about it anyway, and it doesn't matter. So what actually is spiritual? So if ego is not a spiritual thing to work on, what can I work on? What is spiritual? And the thing is that everything is spiritual and nothing is spiritual at the same time, because spirituality in itself is also just a concept. So everything that you have right now, at this very moment in time, everything that you observe, everything that is, everything that not is, everything that you can see, everything that you cannot see, everything is spiritual. Why are you judging the situation? Why are you judging yourself? Why are you judging the situation? Why are you in a position to split yourself from reality and say, oh, I need to work on myself spiritually? Because if you're already whole, what is there to do? And why should the current situation not be whole? Everything is perfect right now, at this very moment in time, no matter what you do. And because we're an optimizing people, and this is our ego again of survival and procreation, this is the thing. A lot of people become spiritual because they want to optimize their survival and procreation. They would never confess to it, and maybe they're not even consciously aware of it. But most people enter spirituality because they want to optimize their survival and procreation. Because otherwise, you would have to accept that there is nothing that needs to be changed in order for something to be spiritual. Because everything right now is spiritual. There is no spiritual or spiritual. Even if you have no capacity whatsoever to see anything, and you're completely caught within survival and procreation, you're still 100% spiritual. Your whole experience is 100% spiritual. Religiously speaking, there is an example of a higher power giving us skin after we felt baked and ashamed that this ego is going to allow this. Well, I don't deal with these kind of fake stories. If there's like religious stories why something happened, I mean, that just reminds me of 100,000 different mythical gods and stories, from Greek gods to, you know, some Quechua gods, or I don't know, Egyptian stories, whatever. It's all bullshit. What is true, that there is an energy dynamics and energy mechanisms within the body. Like you have the Pingala, the Ida energy, the Sushumna energy, the chakras. You have these things. Those are energetic truths of how the world works and how your body works. And it's all astrologically, cosmologically tied into everything. And everything else that we cannot fathom, that we cannot truly understand, that we truly see, is just speculations, pure speculation. And so in order to get away from speculation to pure truth, you have to understand that everything is spiritual, that there are moments of experiences where you recognize that, you know, for example, that you've been identified with something that you're truly not. For example, thoughts. So if you spiritually awaken and you recognize, oh, I've been way too much identified with my thoughts, and now I can let go of my thoughts and I don't need to give them attention. That's a form of freedom. But it doesn't mean that you are more spiritual than you were before. This just means that you recognize a mechanism of the 3D world of Maya that you didn't recognize before. It's just like when you think, for example, one huge black pill, which I think a lot of people are not aware of, and this is gonna blow your mind. Okay, I have a theory, a hypothesis, that men love differently than women, and they do this because men. Did you know that men fall in love twice as fast as women? It's scientifically proven that men fall in love with women twice as fast as women do. And I have a hypothesis that women don't actually love truly men. You know why they don't truly love men? Because women don't need to give up resources. Men fall in love with women because they need to give up resources. And if they didn't fall in love with women, they wouldn't be ready to give up the resources. So they're actually falling in love with women as a biological mechanism to give up their resources. Because men will never love... Men would otherwise... They would love their resources more than they would love the women. So they need the woman in order to give up the resources. And so they acquire resources. I mean, look at everything that's happening in society. All the men trying to acquire resources in order to have better procreation. Okay? Status, power, money, whatever. It's like literally that's the mechanism throughout all of society. Okay? That's why then Sadia Khan talks about, you know, high value men and so forth. So he gains resources, and then he meets a woman, and he meets many women, and suddenly he falls in love with a woman. What does he do? What's the first thing that he does? He gives up his resources to the woman. And the mechanism, it's so interesting because everybody goes through the kind of like automated kind of like biological reactions without recognizing. So they go through motions without being conscious of what's happening. And when you are a brutal spiritual red pillar, where you recognize everything that's happening, you're like, what the fuck? And everybody's doing it because they're unconscious. They're like unconscious monkeys going through their organism, you know, reactions. So they acquire resources, they fall in love, and they give up their resources. If they didn't fall in love, they would not give up their resource, because you will notice that they give up the resources, especially to the women that they fall in love with, not to any random woman. So there is an emotional attachment, emotional heart chakra relationship where they give up the resources. So what I'm posturing is basically, I'm postulating that the act of falling in love only exists for men to give up their resources. That's why for women, most relationships are transactional and not truly falling in love. But here comes the thing. Women fall in love with their children, or they love their children, not falling, they love their children. Why? Because they need to give up their energy, time, and resources. If they didn't have... So what I'm saying is, you can de-romanticize pretty much all of society. You can deconstruct it. And you can recognize that falling in love is not actually romantic. It doesn't exist. It is only there for giving up resources. And that's a very, very harsh social... I think I'm the first person in the world to actually put out this hypothesis. And I think it would shock the world if they would truly recognize the truth of that. And because if there was such a thing as unconditional love, then unconditional love would have to be towards everything, not just a certain person. You cannot be unconditional loving a person and conditionally loving or not loving everyone else. There is only unconditional, there's only one form, because one thing is the emotional love. That's the one we've been talking about. And then there's the universal love. That's the truly unconditional love. Okay, that's basically where you're so detached from personhood and the body, like Ramana Maharshi was, where you're unconditional towards everything. But that means literally everything, even your worst enemy that is trying to poison you. And that is true enlightenment then. And I do believe that it exists, but then there's very little purpose for the soul to remain in that body. So I think when you start to look at things and really dissect them, you will recognize that things work much different than you think they do. And I think for the man, for the unenlightened man, or the man that doesn't have enlightenment in their soul plan, where it's most likely won't happen, which is almost every man, the most purposeful beingness is, let's call it the hedonistic way of being, where you boost, enjoy, and focus on your vitality. A little bit like Brian Johnson is doing in a way, but he's not doing it really in the way that I mean. I was talking about libido empowerment and libido suppression. Libido empowerment is the open sacral chakra, is the joy and sexuality. The more you have the possibility, the option for joy and sexuality, the more you have vitality, the more your body is in a good state. There's other things to that, there's levels to that, but in generally that is the case. And I notice people when they die very early, like when I observe people that die, with 50 something, 40 something, 60 something, I notice that they died. I could already see in them that they were dying. And the reason is because they were completely suppressing their libido empowerment. So they were complete in their libido suppression. And for whatever reason, there's many reasons why to do this. Somebody might be conditioned. The other one, is married to a handicapped person and doesn't want to feel their joy anymore, and so forth. There's many reasons. Or the husband or wife dies and they shortly die after because they don't feel joy anymore, and so forth. So there's many different reasons. So you could say that as long as you haven't figured out enlightenment, okay, which is really just the grace of the universe, whether you will experience that or not. You cannot force yourself to enlighten. It doesn't work, no matter how much sadhana you do. Except if it's in your soul plan, then you just go that direction. The thing that makes most sense for most people, and they do it, but some people do it blindly, instinctively, some people not aware of it, but you can become super aware of it. This is what I'm doing in my life, is conscious libido empowerment. Designing your life in such a way that you receive continuous boosts of libido empowerment, joy and sexuality, option and possibility for that, and thereby enjoy the vital energy of, I don't know what's called in Hinduism, like Shakti or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called. Like this kind of energy that runs through your spine. Activating that, enjoying that, living that. Instead of trying to fight it or optimize it, suppress it. So these kind of things. Yeah. And actually, the sooner you understand it and the sooner you start, the better. Because it builds on top of each other. Like if you're 60 years old and you start to do it, you can have an immediate effect. Of course, you can start immediately, but it's a little bit determined also on social status. And that's it for now.